Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of HCTalk. As always, I'm your host, Lance Gormley. Our guest on the program today is Dennis Travis, who's the Halstead Mayor. How are you doing today, Dennis?
Oh, pretty good.
Pretty good. Thank you for coming out on the program. Usually what I try to do the first time I introduce anybody on the program is we kind of get a digital autobiography, as I call it, but we didn't have the opportunity to do that with you. Maybe we'll do that sometime here shortly in the future. But there's some stuff happening in Halstead. There's some economic development that's being talked about. It seems like it's raising a lot of eyebrows. There's, starting to get that divide down the middle, and people are going one way or they're going the other. And I called you up and I said, Dennis, what is going on in your wonderful, beautiful city of Halstead, Kansas? And you said that there's some stuff that's in the works. We don't know what's going to happen at this point in time or in the very early stages of it. And I said, started picking your brain a little bit because I wanted to have, some more information on it. And I'm somebody that wants to look at one side, the other side, and I've said it on the program before, then for me to decide or for people to decide. So I asked you, hey, is there any way you can come out here on the program, just talk with people a little bit, let them know what's going on, just where you're at this stage in the game, if you want to call it that, and you happily obliged. So I appreciate that. And I don't really know how to get into this except for just pretty much just ask the question, what's going on in Halstead with the battery? It's a battery storage facility. Is that correct, or am I already saying it wrong?
It's B.E.S.S, Battery Energy Storage System. And the name pretty much fits what it is. It's a series of batteries that stores electricity for later use on the grid.
Okay.
We are very early in the discovery process. The reason the information has gotten out public is I made a pledge to the community when I ran for mayor to be transparent. And any project for economic development that could potentially have some naysayers on it, you're better to get that transparency or that project out in the open to start with. Don't want any perception that we're trying to hide any information from the public. Yeah. I've tried to answer as many questions as I can on social media, but at the end of the day, I have a regular job too that I have to do, and I don't have time to dedicate every waking moment to my social media pages either.
Yeah, yeah.
So I appreciate you having me on. This is another avenue I can use to get my message out, and right now my message is simple. We've been approached by a developer. They have an idea for a project that could be very significant for Halstead, but we're still in the discovery process. We're still trying to decide, is this a feasible project for our community? And simply the answer is, I don't know yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're going to continue to look at it.
Well, and in a lot of situations when somebody's an elected official, people have the expectation that just because you're an elected official, you're supposed to know everything about everything, et cetera, and that's rarely the case. It's something that you have to go at with an open mind. You have to educate yourself. You have to be a critical thinker and walk through the process until you are able to come to what you think is a good decision. Normally that's accompanied by a vote, one direction or another. But I do find it interesting that the company that has approached Halstead, might just kind of be in your wheelhouse. So I always look for credibility of the individual that's speaking. Can you give people just a little bit of an understanding about what your occupation is and maybe why you are able to look at this scenario and really be able to understand and interpret the information in a way that maybe some people might not be able to?
Sure. For 30 years, I've been a licensed journeyman electrician. Went through the IBEW apprenticeship in Wichita, and part of that transition in my career has led me to process control and instrumentation sales. And I've been doing that for 26 years. And to further define that, if you're in a refinery or you're in any kind of a gas plant and they're running that process from a computer, I sell all the equipment that goes out in the field that makes that happen. So I'm involved in high-level engineering discussions on all these plants. My particular company did a lot of work on all the ethanol plants across the state of Kansas. I continue to work a lot in the midstream area with people like Williams, Magellan, Enterprise, Southern Star. all those people with midstream gas resources and LNGs, and basically just the energy sector in general. And originally, when I started out 26 years, our primary focus was in power. Well, because of wind energy, because of other renewable resources, the power plants that I used to call on are absolutely going away. You don't see a lot of the old gas-fired steam plants anymore. The only coal plant that I go to is out in Holcomb, Kansas. And for reference, that's around a 600 megawatt plant. Renewables have really brought a lot more to the grid than what people realize. And part of that problem is if you have all these renewables out there running, and you don't need them to run, what do you do with that excess power? It's no different than when we have a bumper corn harvest. What do you do with the extra corn? Well, you store it in a silo, yep. And then when you need it, you can go get it. This is really no different than that.
Interesting. Okay, so just kind of walk me through maybe a chronological type of explanation, which is how did this come about? I mean, you're the mayor, right? So any kind of economic development prospect that comes to a certain community, or they're looking for a certain community to invest in, there's a lot that goes into that. So just when did, I don't want to call it the best facility, but when did the company that is looking at trying to potentially call Halstead home for one of their battery storage facilities approach you all?
Well, I can't give you the exact date, but we as the city of Halstead, we do fund a portion of the Harvey County Economic Development Team, and Ethan and I both serve on their board. We're also on the Harvey County Council of Government, so we try to stay engaged with Harvey County too, as well as what we're doing in the city. And a call came in to Harvey County Economic Development that somebody was interested in land in our industrial park. So my city manager fielded that call, called them back, and they came to the table and said, hey, we want to build a battery energy storage system in your industrial park. We're like, well, that's great, but we don't have zoning to cover that. So that started the conversation. Then we fast forward to they needed to make application to the Southwest Power Pool to approve a connection to the grid to make this happen, which they've done. But before they could make that application, they had to show that they had control of the ground, i.e. we put together a lease. Now, the lease itself does not allow them to do any construction. It does allow them to do any soil sampling, anything like that they would need to do as a pre-construction method before they start something like this. But absolutely no construction. And, by blind faith, that developer said, yeah, we'll enter into a lease agreement with you guys. We know you're going to develop planning and zoning ordinances to cover this. And, we're hoping that, and we're trusting that you can get through that process to the point where we could potentially build this plant. And a large capital investment on their part had to accompany that application to Southwest Power Pool. And once that was done, I'm a sales guy, so I like to qualify opportunities. Well, when somebody invests a significant amount of money towards a project, that makes it 100% qualified to me that, hey, they're serious, they want to do this. And right then was probably the point in time when I started looking at the technology. That's kind of how it got started.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the only thing up to date so far that's transpired is a company has come to economic development in Harvey County. Harvey County then fielded that over to you all because it was of your interest. They were looking at Halstead and your industrial park. From there, then some steps had to be taken in good faith between the city and this company to say we would like to start moving in this direction. But then a lease at this point has no approval for any kind of construction. It's just them securing this place, this land, in the event that they can move forward in cooperation with whatever checklist needs to take place in the event that it moves forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So you talked about planning and zoning and not having necessarily, anything on the books at this point in time. This is new technology. I mean, not new, maybe last 10 years, this has really started to ramp up.
Yeah, commercially about 2015 is when battery energy storage centers started hitting the grid.
Okay. So then, so as we've moved forward over the last 10 years, communities that otherwise had never addressed this at all are now having to look at, how do we change our ordinance, or what does our planning and zoning need to do in order to make this as safe and effective as it possibly can be? Is that the idea?
Well, that's my idea. Okay. There's been some personal case study that I've done on different cities that have these systems. One in particular, Escondido, California, there was an incident out there that I read about. And what blew me away is Escondido, California had no planning and zoning to cover these. They just basically let them come to town and build them with no regulations, right. Which, as far as a governing body responsibility, it just blows me away they let that happen. They had an incident with a facility, and I read up on that. It was one container that caught on fire, and the fire department, everybody responded how they expected them to, and the fire stayed contained to that one container and basically burned itself out. It took some time to do it, and they did evacuate some people that were within 1,000 feet of that plant for an extra precaution of safety. And basically, I consider that almost a worst-case scenario. Now, that particular plant, we can get into it later, but there's a big difference between the NMC technology and the LFP technology on batteries. That was an NMC battery in that container, and I believe, if I remember right, that plant was commissioned in 2017, so it had been sitting there running for quite a while with no problems. And after I read through that article, I started to research the city of Escondido and found out they have like 27 other operating B.E.S.S systems right there in their hometown, in their city, within their city limits, with no regulations in place. And that absolutely blew me away that they didn't have those regulations in place.
So going forward with this situation, is the Planning and Zoning Board actively right now researching this and studying this to see what kind of recommendations need to be made in order for...
I believe they are. When the opportunity first came to the table, I went to the first couple of planning and zoning meetings. We took a hard look at New York City's planning and zoning rules, and I know those were presented to our planning and zoning board as kind of a pattern to follow. And then with public getting involved in all that, after that second meeting, I decided not to attend any more planning and zoning meetings because I didn't want anybody to think I was influencing that board in any manner. I do think they have draft regulations on the table. I think there's a few more things they're changing. Eventually, those draft regulations will come before the city council for either approval or denial, and the council could redline them, send them back, ask for changes. I don't know how that process is going to go.
Okay, so when we talk about phases of for most people that are unaware, not saying everybody, but for people that are unaware, normally when it comes to economic development, prospects, and then eventually a company coming to a community and calling it home, to being built and then to being up and running, whatever that might be, there's phases.
Oh, there's
right?
a lot.
So can you just, for the audience, explain a little bit about phases? I don't want people to get the concept that, well, this company wants to come here, you guys gave them the approval, it's said and done, and now however they want to do, we're just subject to whatever they want to do. It's a process. So kind of help educate people what's the process, Dennis?
I'm not even sure I can give you all the steps to the process, but the way I know it, for this project to go, step one would be Southwest Power Pool would have to approve that connection. That has not been done yet. Secondly, planning and zoning has got to come up with a set of regulations and ordinances for that application in our industrial park that the council approves of. It could take a significant amount of time just to get through that process. Then one of the things that I've heard, and I don't know if because nothing's been approved yet, I can't say it's for sure, but the initial talk was that the planning and zoning was going to hold this particular use to what's called a special use permit. So even if the zoning and everything was in place, the developer would have to start all over again with the special use permit process to get through it. And probably, in my opinion, that was the smartest thing our P&Z board did, because at the end of the day, it does give the city final control and final say-so on how this plant would be constructed. So that would have to happen and get through that, and then you're going to get on to, okay, this thing's approved. Well, we still don't have a contract in place to agree with the developer. There's an offer on the table now. I'm not dumb enough to take the first offer on the table, so that's going to have to be negotiated.
Okay.
And
just not to interrupt you, right? But you just mentioned an offer on the table. So this developer has already mentioned, hey, this is kind of what we want to do. Because most cases, you're talk about any kind of economic development in an industrial site as a big investment. Usually that's millions of dollars, and then tax revenue is generated from that in the form of property taxes at a pretty impressive tax rate. It's not like your residential rate. I mean, it's quite a bit more, and so then it also might provide jobs. So just and I don't know if that's the case with this at all, but what's if you can say what it is, what's so far been discussed?
Well, some of the public pressure for a long time was we don't see a benefit with this, and that was true. I couldn't share a benefit with them because we didn't know. We didn't know which way the legislature was going to go. And if you look, and it's still not completely through, but we're pretty sure it's going to get clear through, and that's House Bill 2083. And when House Bill 2083 was presented for approval, it basically made these entities doing these type of projects tax exempt. And right now the way it's worded is it's tax exempt for 10 years. So after that came to the table, the developer knows that unless there's some kind of financial win for Halstead, there's no way we would even consider the project. So they came to me and they said, look, we'll pay you $500,000 a year to exist in your industrial park. So currently, that is the offer on the table. There's some ancillary things included with that. Our fire department needs a few additional items of equipment. The developers agreed to pay for them. There's some other talk of the sales tax that we could possibly miss out on the equipment, where they would come in and backfill that on the front end of the project. And because that's part of a contract negotiation, I really don't want to get into the detail on that.
Understood.
But there is a large financial aspect surrounding the project.
Okay, so $500,000. Talking about that tangible amount of money. Halstead's not a big community. You guys do have some industry there, obviously. What can you kind of give a comparison to people that are in Halstead or in Harvey County that are listening to this program right now? What does that actually look like? Is there a comparison? I mean, you guys have leg there, wonderful company, wonderful industrial company. I don't know how much taxes are generated by their being in Halstead. I'm sure there are some. So can you give me a comparison as to what does actually $500,000 look like, or what kind of an economic development would Halstead need to have to be able to get that much money a year?
The first thing that comes to mind, because that figure is fresh in my head, Halstead as a city, we get 2.5% of the available taxes in Harvey County, and the last I knew, we collected about $550,000 in sales tax last year. So this would effectively double the amount of sales tax coming to Halstead. So that's a pretty significant number. When you talk about local businesses, and look, I love and support all my local businesses. A lot of those managers and owners are personal friends of mine. But at the end of the day, if you combine our top 10 businesses in Halstead and look at what they pay in taxes, the offer on the table from this developer is a higher number than that total combination.
Yeah. So that's a huge deal.
It's a very attractive offer. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's when you look at that and you have that comparison, whether you be for it or against it at this stage in the game, of what's coming, and if let's say that $500,000 is solidified, and that's all the more you're going to. Let's just say all that hypothetical. That's a game changer for Halstead.
I believe so. I think about, Halstead overall, we're a very fiscally sound community anyway. The governing body's always been pretty conservative, pretty careful with how we spend money. And at the end of the day, we still have projects we want to get done. We've been getting pretty aggressive with street replacements lately. If you're aware, if you've been following the governing body's actions, we did approve for a new wastewater treatment plant. That's right now a $4.3 million project. Yeah. So that's in the back of my mind. My city staff has done a great job going out for grants. And, we got a grant for the Safe Routes to School program that was pretty significant. We got another one to help build the spec building in our industrial park. And we got one to replace North Street, which is probably one of the main arteries that really needs to be replaced in Halstead. And that particular street has a lot of infrastructure in it, and in my opinion is the most expensive street to replace in town short of Main Street. But we went out for a grant on that, and that's a cost match grant, a 50-50 cost share, and that's a $3 million project. So we've got to come up with $1.5 million for that. So we've got a way to fund these projects without working with this developer. But how nice would it be? Think about a wastewater treatment plant. Typically, those are 30-year notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if we could pay for that plant in 5 years?
Yeah, well, everybody in Newton knows. Everybody always talks about the utility bill in Newton, and nobody is happy. I hate to say it that way, but that's been a point of contention for a lot of residents to say, this was a huge investment that we had to make in our community. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's got to be paid for. So that then falls the burden to the tax-paying citizen. Yeah. And if there's no increase in revenue, it's interesting how this is shaping up to be a similar conversation in Halstead that's already been happening in Newton as far as these investments that have to be made in the community and look for a way to fund them.
Absolutely. And I think we've been putting Band-Aids on that wastewater treatment plant for years. And it comes to a point in time where you're throwing good money after bad money, and it's just time for replacement. And we're there. Obviously, the council agrees with me on that we're there, which is what brought this project to the table. And we knew we were facing long-term financing to get it done. We're going to have to borrow the money from the state idle funds to do that project. There is a potential chance that some of that loan could be forgiven. I hold out high hopes for that, right. Because anything that ends up costing us less money means we have more capital to invest in other infrastructure, other projects in Halstead. Yeah. Halstead has not had the ability to do a lot of quality of life projects. There's talk in town. People want a community center, maybe a rec center, things like that. Things that I felt were kind of out of reach because we had higher priority items that needed to be addressed first. Well, now some of those wants that are more wants than needs, some of those wants may be able to move up in schedule to where we could start looking at some of those projects as a logistic project going forward.
And so I want to take a turn on you real quick. I'm not throwing you under the bus, and I'm not hopefully not throwing you for a loop. But I've been watching this. I in the beginning I was hearing things as they came out. I try to keep up on the different municipalities and things going on in the different communities, and whether you call that newsworthy or not, or just things that we can talk about on the program, or people that we could have come on the program and talk with about those things and have somebody represent their community, such as what you're doing right now. But what I see happening is that there are people that are concerned at this point in time with the idea that if we move forward with this, then inevitably this is just going to turn into a disaster that poisons all of our water, burns our community to the ground. And I don't mean to laugh about that, but to me, I'm a little bit more reserved when it comes to things like that. So just kind of addressing that scenario to the person that might throw out there, this analogy that took place someplace or another place. We talked about it a little bit earlier. A situation where something caught on fire. What could you say to those people if they were sitting right across from you and asking, "What about the what ifs?"
Obviously, there's always going to be what ifs with any large scale industrial project. Risk management is something that everybody looks at. I'm not a professional risk management engineer. I have a gut feeling about where this project lies, and I'll wait until we do a final risk management survey before I really weigh in with those hard numbers. But in my opinion, and this is simply my opinion, we're already exposed to more risk with rail traffic alone than what this plant would bring to town. Now, that being said, there's obviously some problems that have happened in California, Moss Landing being a prime example. And really, I've been through all the reports on the previous fires and everything at Moss Landing, and Moss Landing stands out as an absolute example of what not to do with one of these plants. And I could go into hours of detail with the problems I see with that plant. And remember, I work in the industry, but I'm not a professional directly related to batteries, but there is a certain level of common sense that comes into play too. Moss Landing Phase 2, if you look at that, very similar construction. I fully anticipate they'll probably experience some of the same problems. Now, when you look at Moss Landing Phase 3, you'll notice that they've started to adapt to more of the NFPA 855 style, with the containers of batteries being installed outside. There's some separation on them, as NFPA 855 would suggest, and they are definitely moving in a safer direction with their installs, and I contend that is because of the effect that NFPA 855 has had on these installations. So I don't think you can compare the project that we're looking at today to a Moss Landing Phase 1. You could probably take a look at Moss Landing Phase 3, and yeah, we're going to be more along the lines of similar to that, but I think we are also looking at adhering to a higher level of regulation than even that plant did. And it could change. I don't even know. I know the 2026 NFPA 855 is due out any time now. Interesting tidbit. One of those public meetings, if anybody noticed a gentleman that was with me at one of those meetings, well, he's a personal friend of mine, and he sits on 2 NEC committees, National Electric Code committees, and he's also sitting on that NFPA 855 committee. So I brought him on as a third-party resource to me personally. And, I'm not going to give his name here, but, I'm talking to him. He's been a friend of mine for 30 years, and I'm saying, if you see something that I need to know about, you need to let me know what you're seeing that you're uncomfortable with. And he walked away from that meeting about in the same place I did, which is kind of what I expected. We still have more questions, but, things are looking decent.
Yeah. I oftentimes use the analogy, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. So if what I'm starting to see, and this is totally me, this is not you, so no reflection of my comments onto you, and I'll just, as a disclosure there, but in some instances, and I've watched this happen within our community, is we tend to say, well, this could potentially be the end result. We're not even close to that yet. We haven't even crossed that bridge yet, but we're ready to blow the bridge up before we ever get there. That there's a process that we're going through, and then try to encourage people to continue to study this, look at it as it moves forward. You can ask questions, you can learn, you can educate yourself. Are we really in that process here, Dennis? I mean, when I called you, I asked you specifically when coming on the program, are you a proponent for this or are you anti this? And your answer to that question was, well, at this point in time, it's kind of too early. It's too early to tell. I'm in the let's research this. Let's see how this progresses forward. There's a lot left to go through before we ever get there. And I said, Dennis, I want you on the program.
and you're spot on, Lance. That's right where I'm at. I'm not quick to come to conclusions and just say, oh yeah, the money looks great, let's build this tomorrow. No, that's not me. I act responsibly for my neighbors, and people in town that I love and friendships that I cherish, I don't want to expose them to any unnecessary dangers. So yeah, we are taking a hard look at every aspect of it, and there's so many pieces to this puzzle that have to end up coming together down the road to make a successful project, and we're a long ways away from that. But I can tell you, I spend almost every waking hour when I'm not needed at my day job researching this. And the research that I've done with the safety improvements that we've seen come along in the industry, it's very encouraging. It's more encouraging than it is discouraging, but there's still a lot of questions. People, there's been several comments made publicly where people are focused on that developer. And because of my background in these large-scale industrial projects that I work on every day, I say forget the developer. At the end of the day, he really matters. What you want to focus on is who's the engineer, whose equipment are they using, and who's the contractor putting it in. Because at the end of the day, those three things matter more than who the developer is. But a lot of people that aren't familiar with the industry don't understand that. And a lot of people, they see news headlines like Moss Landing, and they're scared, and people that are scared of things they don't understand tend to rebel against them. And I understand that. Yeah. And all I've asked is for people's trust in me to, explore this opportunity and see where it could potentially get. Yeah. And we're kind of getting started with that.
Yeah. And when you say you're just kind of getting started with that, if there was if let's say there's 100%, if you put it in percentages, 1% being the first time that you got the phone call, 100% is being where they're up, operational, and running. On a percentage, where are you at in that from 0 to 100?
15, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, really, at the end of the day, that connection request has got to be approved from Southwest Power Pool before anything can happen. That special use permit requires a lot of different, I can't tell you the exact studies. One of them is a hazard mitigation analysis for the actual site, and that includes the proximity of this equipment to the asphalt plant, to the co-op's anhydrous storage. I want to see that. There's other, I'm going to say, environmental studies that need to be done. So there's a lot of work to be done as part of that special use permit. And, people are out there publicly now and they want the data. But at the end of the day, until you're at that part in the process, you're relying on the developer to pay for this data. Is he really going to want to invest any more money if he doesn't think the project has a snowball's chance in Hades of going through? And you can't blame them for that. It's just bad business from that aspect. Yeah. So it's baby steps, and we got to get through each of these steps. And I continue to research to try to find new stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff from 2022 through 2024, and trying to search for new information that's 2025 is proving difficult. But as the year grows longer, well, some of those articles are going to come to the table, and there's several different websites that are third-party sites that I'm following for that information.
Yeah, well, you mentioned rail traffic, okay, as that being a hazard, and almost, if I heard you correctly, you mentioned that is potentially a hazard in as much, if not more, than the end result here. And it got my mind thinking, well, here's Newton again, my hometown. We've got rail running right through the middle of town. And if something were to happen, because something can happen, and one of those trains derail, let's say it's carrying hazard material, that doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing, right? I mean, we know this. We know that the prevailing winds, right, in Kansas are either from the south or from the north, majority of the time from the south. That means that if a train derails where I live in Newton, if there's toxic material on it, I'm going to be getting evacuated. Everybody on the north side of town the potential for there to be a hazard from that is always a clear and present danger in a way. I mean,
and again, the lack of rail accidents tends to make people complacent to the issue. You're absolutely right. I mean, you look at some of those cars that are going down the railroad tracks. If you look at those chemical placards, it'd scare you to death. I worked in a refrigerant manufacturing place for a long time, and one of the primary elements to make refrigerant is anhydrous hydrofluoric acid. And I've told a few people this story, and now that I tell you, next time you're sitting at a rail crossing, you're going to identify one of these cars, and you're going to go, darn it, Dennis, I wish you wouldn't have told me that.
From here on out, I'm never going to stop and be stuck in traffic at a train, boy, I tell you.
But if you look for a white car with an orange band around the middle, that's HF acid. That's probably some of the most nasty stuff I've ever been around in my career. And if one of those cars tipped over, split open, yeah, it has the potential of taking out a large chunk of a community. Now, the railroad, because they've had accidents in the past, they've recognized that. They've installed safety standards. They're doing everything they can to mitigate those accidents. One of those is speed limits coming through a popularized area. And track maintenance and things like that. So, and that's my point is, we're going to be exposed to a hazard, but there are methods and ways of mitigating those hazards to make it acceptable. Can we get to that level with the B.E.S. system? I don't know. The more research I do, the more I do think that we can get to that level, but I'm just not 100% there yet.
Yeah. Well, my opinion, totally my opinion. Once again, not saying anything. This is not a reflection on Dennis, but my opinion has always been that when any time of any industrial area always has some potential to create or to have problems, right? It's like you just said with the mitigating of it. This is not something that, in my experience, communities, planning and zoning boards, fire marshals, companies just go about willy-nilly. This is not a willy-nilly thing. If they're learning from technology that, hey, this happened in this location, it's not like that just goes unchecked for it to happen everywhere. They want to fix the problem, right? I don't know of anybody that would want for a worst-case scenario to just be multiplied and compounded while everybody says, oh, that's no biggie, right? I mean, hey, it happens. They try to do things to fix that. Yeah,
and one of the places I follow is called EPRI, and EPRI maintains a database of B.E.S. accidents across the U.S. And you can walk your way through EPRI and look at their website and see the past accidents and find a lot of data on what created those accidents. And NFPA 855 looks at EPRI. They look at ways to, hey, can we institute changes to help mitigate a problem like this? A big example, there was a B.E.S. down in Arizona, and I can't remember what year it was, but it was early on. And the design was such that it had a walk-in area, which the new battery containment pods do not have an area to walk in. I mean, they try to make these things as tight as possible for all the batteries. And the reason they do that is to cut down on the volume for gas to expand in them. And that was the problem with that particular one is it suffered a fire, and firefighters responded to it, and they opened the door. And there was a combustible atmosphere, a buildup of gas in there. And when they opened that door, that gas came out, it found an ignition source, and it blew up and injured 4 firefighters. So after that incident, NFPA started in with how to mitigate that. And that's what has developed into these tighter condensed battery containers where there's just enough room for the batteries and not really that excess room to grow that large volume of gas. The other thing that I find interesting on today's manufacturers is that they actually have, and the only way I can explain it, it's a relief valve that's built into the top of the container. And if that container starts to pressure up, well, that relief valve will just burp slightly, and it'll let that extra pressure out. So it tries to avoid building an explosive environment. Now, that being said, these are mechanical spring-loaded devices. Most of the manufacturers that have designed one, it's still a mechanical device, but they have a sensor that measures the movement on it. So if they've got a container sitting out there that's burping extra gas, well, they know they got a battery that's causing a problem, and that's one of the early indicators that, hey, this valve is moving, so you need to go out there and probably shut this thing down, or you can shut it down remotely and then have somebody go out and look and see if they can figure out what's going on. There's a lot of safety advances that have come along, and we've looked at several best manufacturers. Tesla is a big one. Sungrow's a big one. Siemens has one. Another company that I used to do a lot of work with is Schneider Electric. There are several out there. I think ABB's probably got one. Yeah. But manufacturers are recognizing what the dangers are in the industry, and they're coming up with methods of mitigation to avoid those big dangers.
Yeah, and I got to say this. I just trying to prep myself in a very small portion of time from when we talked to get in here, because I think getting this information out and hearing what's actually transpiring and where we're at, where Halstead's at, where Harvey County is at in this process, and as you affirmed, we were 15% of 100%, right? So I think it's very healthy and good and an awesome thing that citizens and members of community want to be involved. They want to be informed. They want to have some say in what's going on in their community, and those are all very positive things. But what I found was the most interesting and striking to me was that, well, this is not going away, right? Like this battery storage technology, it's only going to improve. They're going to continue. I say they, the infamous they, but this is the future of our energy, regardless of whether or not we want it to be, some of us, right? And so that was the thing, like I said, that was most striking me. This is nothing that's going to stop. If it's not Halstead, it'll be another community. If it's not Harvey County, it'll be another county. It will be in the state of Kansas. So when you're looking at that, you're talking about planning and zoning and everything that has to do with that. I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, that's. I know I didn't ask a question, Dennis, but that was the thing that to me. It's like, well, this isn't going anywhere. If it's not in Halstead and not Harvey County, it's gonna be somewhere else. You guys haven't written your planning and zoning yet for it. How important would that be to the future of what's going on here, and how important that? So all this is swimming around in my brain. I didn't have enough time to draw a conclusion. I'm gonna be studying this similar to you, both sides. Like I said in the beginning of the program, hear one side, hear another side, and then I'll decide, or the audience decide, or you decide. Just give me something with that, Dennis. I didn't even ask you a question. I'm so sorry. I threw it all at you, the whole sinking table,
The people that know me are going to know this is one of my typical sayings. And wow, Lance, thanks for kicking the crust off of that one. I'm glad you brought it up, because another piece of this puzzle, and another big concern of mine, is with the growth projected with this industry and just the need for it. Yeah, we are going to see it. I won't disclose the locations, but I did find Southwest Power Pool's connection list. There is application right now in the state of Kansas for 25 standalone B.E.S. connections out there. Then there's 8 more that are paired with solar farms and 1 that's paired with a wind farm. So this is not going anywhere anytime soon, and I've reminded people that right now we're taking the steps, even if this project don't get approved. Let's get planning and zoning in place. So if somebody forces us into putting a B.E.S. in, maybe we can make them follow our rules. I don't even know if that'll work. And I had a lady on one of my Facebook posts. She said, well, what do you mean by we might not have a choice? Well, what I mean by that was January 20th, 2025, President Trump declared a national energy emergency. If the federal government decided we need to put these in, they could come to town and put one in, and we wouldn't have a choice in it, and we wouldn't make any money off of it. So there's that thought in the back of my mind. That's just another piece of the puzzle laying out there. And then with the projected growth numbers I see with this industry, and the fact that we have a developer coming to us. It's not a utility. Utilities, number one, don't have the extra capital to invest in new technology, so to speak. They rely on the private industry to take care of that. Well, the private industry has recognized, hey, this is a capital-making venture that we can get involved in. The prices on the lithium-ion batteries has come down to make this reasonable. The payback's there. We're going to invest millions of dollars in this. Yeah. So, with the market and with the added benefit to secure energy in the United States, I don't think we're going to stop this from happening across the country. Right now, China has the largest growth in these types of facilities, and the United States is in second place behind China with this.
Amazing. Okay, well, we are getting a little bit long in the tooth, Dennis, on the program here. I want to give you any opportunity that you have to cover anything that we didn't cover, or maybe to answer any questions. I could ask you if there was any question that I should have asked that I didn't ask, and ask that for you, or you could wrap it up by just speaking directly to the hearts and the minds of anybody listening, and giving the final word. You make that decision.
Well, I'm happy to stay here as long as you need me to, Lance. I made a promise to the people that voted for me for mayor of Halstead to be transparent. I'm trying to be transparent on this. Obviously, when it comes to contract negotiations and things that are protected by NDAs, I can't. But the part of this process that I can be transparent on, I will. And people that know me in town, they know, hey, if you want to know why we're doing what we're doing, come talk to me. I'll talk to anybody. And you can even be against me and call me a dirty, rotten SOB. I'll still have a conversation with you. We're very early in this process. There's a lot of detail to get through to ever get to an end game. I'm doing a lot of research. I'll continue doing my research. But I got to tell you, the more I do the research, the more encouraging the opportunity looks. At the end of the day, we have to mitigate the dangers to make it viable. And it's going to take more people than just me to make that decision. We'll have to get engineering firms involved at some point. So we'll just keep doing what we're doing. You got any other things you want to ask me?
No, I have all these things I could ask, but I feel as though by asking those questions, it would just come back with the same responses. I don't know yet. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. I could ask what ifs, but like after having this conversation with you, I just have to come to the conclusion, honestly, at this point that, well, we're early enough in the process. So for me, what my game plan going forward is, and I'd love to have you on the podcast again as this progresses, just to say, well, we're early on in it. Maybe those details are not available yet. I can't draw a conclusion about whether or not I think this is a good thing or a bad thing or anything in between. I just want to gather the data and keep researching this. And you've given stuff here. I'm going to go back and listen to this program. I'm going to look up some of the stuff that you've mentioned, and I want to be able to be as informed as I possibly can. I'm not a Halstead. I'm not a dragon. I'm not a blue dragon, right? But I do look at Halstead as a part of community, Harvey County, my home, and there's not much else to do but to research going forward.
And honestly, Lance, that's another piece of the puzzle. Like I said, I'm forever concerned with what's going on in Halstead, but I'm a good partner for Harvey County as well. And if we get through this process, if we can develop a good set of planning and zoning ordinances to cover a facility like this, when the opportunity comes along to another city in Harvey County, I would fully expect them to reach out and say, hey, how did you guys deal with this? And hopefully we can set the bar. We can be an example for other communities. We'll just have to see how that proceeds down the road.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, Dennis, you are a good man, and I think Halstead is very, very fortunate to have you as their mayor. 5-time champ, right? 5 years ago now.
five years so far.
I love it.
Now I am up for re-election this fall, so we'll see how that goes. But my wife and I are heavily invested in the community of Halstead. I could go in and tell the story, but when we met, we've been married for 5 years now, and when we met, I had a little 2-bedroom house. I picked that house up and moved it 2 blocks and put it on a new basement because I didn't want to leave my big shop I'd built. And she didn't like my house. So I just moved the house and let her have the flexibility to build the house that she wanted. And, you know, couples don't go through that because we're not planning on that being our forever home.
Yeah.
Halstead is really similar to the community I grew up around. It's actually a little bigger. We have a lot of friends there. We're building lifetime friendships. I want to do right by my friends in town, and I got a lot of resistance out there. And I just want to remind them, at the end of the day, you put me in that chair to bring opportunities for growth to Halstead. You brought me there to potentially reduce your taxes in town. But there's a very delicate way we go about that. Industrial growth as a whole, and that was one of the things that was most exciting about that. This industrial park has sit there for 30 plus years with no substantial development, and along comes an opportunity that actually could be the best opportunity that we've ever seen. And I just don't want to shut the door on the opportunity until we've carefully explored it to see if it would be good or not for the city.
So at this point in time, would it just be safe to say that you're undecided?
I'm undecided. I mean, I embrace the technology. I work with it every day. But at the end of the day, I have other questions in my mind that need to be answered before I jump on board. And I'm really wanting to see the result of that professional hazard mitigation analysis. That's going to tell me a lot of what I'm seeking, but it's going to be a ways before that'll happen.
All right, Dennis, we are out of time, my man. So I just want to let you know that I appreciate you coming on the program. I don't know if you gave the final word, but I always give everybody a chance to speak directly to the hearts and the minds of anybody listening. You can say whatever you'd like to say. If you didn't say it now.
The only thing I'll say is, especially for people in Halstead, if you really want to sit down and have a conversation with me on how I see this project through my eyes, well, call me. Well, I'll set up a time. I'll spend time with you. I don't have a problem doing that.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of HC Talk. As always, I was your host, Lance Gormley, and our guest on the program today was Halstead, Kansas City Mayor Dennis Travis, talking about B.E.S.S.
Thanks for having me, Lance.
Have a good one, everybody.